What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Genesis chapter 29 verses 15 through 30 and Genesis chapter 31 verses 36 through 42. Jacob was the consummate sufferer, the classic scapegoat, but also the champion survivor in Haran. He was demoralized upon his arrival in Haran, but he refused to be deflated and defined by the experience. Jacob came from nowhere, arrived with nothing, but left with God's favor. Laban's fortune in his own family. How does a person turn his life around from victim to victor? Why are some victims able to triumph over man-made tragedy, traps, and troubles? What do victors have in them that victims do not have to survive and succeed? First, live humbly with others. Genesis chapter 29, verses 16 through 25. Laban used the dirtiest trick in the book to embrace as well as exploit poor Jacob. Jacob, however, was stretched but never shamed. The earliest indication of a humbled and helpful Jacob was his willingness to work hard for his bride Rachel. The old Jacob took what belonged to others and not his, but the new Jacob earned his family and fortune. Genesis chapter 32, verses 13 through 15. The old-fashioned way. The old Jacob was unwilling to wait one day for his inheritance, but the new Jacob offered to work 7 years for his wife. Unexpectedly and unwittingly, his cunning father-in-law was God's agent of change for the young Jacob, who had to experience poverty and pitfalls before he could expect progress and prosperity. Before Jacob schemed, swindled, and strived, but now money meant little to him. The word work or serve is repeated 6 times in the chapter in verses 15, 18, 20, 25, 27, and 30. Jacob was free labor for 14 years, but joint partner the next 6 years and his own boss only after 20 years. In Genesis chapter 31, verse 38. All in all, Jacob demanded little, but asked his father-in-law 3 harmless questions in verse 25. Throughout his ordeal with Laban, in work and marriage, Jacob purposely and wisely kept his head on, kept his act together, and kept his mouth shut. Second, live harmoniously at home. Genesis chapter 29, verses 26 through 30. One of the most beautiful expressions of love is Jacob's endless love for Rachel in Genesis chapter 29, verse 20. His love for Rachel is the most enduring love story in the Bible. Jacob's love for Rachel was genuine, but Laban's cruelty, Jacob's compliance, and Leah's collusion almost wrecked the family. Rachel and Leah were formidable rivals. They were smitten by the same man, stubborn in their own ways, and stuck with each other. Rachel's problem was not childlessness, but childishness. Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 through 4. Leah's problem was not her appearance, but her attitude, and their issue was not one of rights, but respect. While Rachel looked stunning and striking, and Leah looked sleepy and sluggish, Rachel was the one Jacob loved in life, while Leah was the one buried with him in death. Genesis chapter 49, verse 31. Though Rachel's 2 sons were heavily favored by Jacob, the Messiah would come through Leah's son, Judah. Remarkably, Rachel and Leah's bickering and backbiting stopped, and their story ended after the confrontation and closure with their own father in Genesis chapter 31, verses 14 and 15. Third, live honorably before God. Genesis chapter 31, verses 36 through 42. Jacob left Beersheba in shame, but left Haran with honor. True, Jacob enjoyed working 7 years for Rachel, but Laban enslaved him the next 7 years. Still, Jacob did not take to the bottle, take his responsibility lightly, or take it out on his wives. Jacob cared for the livestock and compensated for their loss, overcoming his father-in-law's unfair and unfounded business practices in verses 39 through 41. In conclusion, obstacles and opposition can terrorize or test us. Have you invited God to be your deliverer and defender in life? Are you dutiful and devoted to your spouse? Do you care for each other? Gina Noah says, things are beautiful if you love them.